All right. Well, this is interesting. Hello. How are you?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
Hanging in there again, trying to stay warm here in cold Florida. Yes, it's cold. 43 degrees is cold in Florida. I'm sorry.
I saw that, and I was cold for you because usually I go there to keep warm at this time of year. But no, I'll just stay here. Here, it's still sub-zero, but I'm not going to gain anything going there.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for the reports of the lizards freezing and dropping off the trees, the iguanas and stuff.
But you better bring back warm weather because when I come in a month, I expect it to be warm.
I can't guarantee it, but hopefully it'll. Hopefully I can bring you some warm weather.
Last year.
What was that?
T-shirts. Last year when I came, we were in T-shirts. It was nice out.
I know. Well, I mean, it's just absolutely crazy. The temperatures is going up and down, up and down, up and down. I was a little bit under the weather over the weekend. Remember, you reached out to me.
Yeah.
I was a little bit under the weather.
Feeling better?
Yeah, feeling better. My son is home from school today because he woke up with a little bit of a fever. So it's like, what can you do?
Nah,
but it's just the weather.
Yeah.
So
welcome to our new podcast, Securing Your Privates.
Okay, welcome everybody. I think this is going to be great. Hopefully, everybody likes our little catchy name, Securing Your Privates. So we are going to be talking about everything privacy, everything security. I'll let my colleague introduce herself first.
Yes, your host, Dr. Lisa McKee and Ray Payano. So Dr. Lisa McKee, I have been in security and technology my entire career, so over 25 years. I started off as a software developer and then just right place, right time, got into security and audit, and GRC and privacy is my passion. So much so that I went and got a PhD in cyber defense, and my dissertation and research is all in data privacy. So I'm super excited to be talking about this. Ray, how about you? I know you're more on the security side a little bit more. You want to tell us about yourself?
Sure. So I've been in security, technology, and security. Well, I started in technology about 28 years ago. And how I know that exact time is because my first technology job was the day I started the job the day before my daughter was born.
Oh.
So started my first day, and then my wife went into labor the following that night, and she was born in the morning. So it was meant to be. So it's been about 28 years. I've jumped around in different areas. I started in networking, went into data management, database management. Then about 15 years ago, decided to start focusing more on cybersecurity. Became a cybersecurity practitioner, and then started working towards more of a GRC role as I gained more experience and honestly got older and started aging. Can't keep up with the young folks anymore, so I decided to go into the GRC area. I've been passionate about just technology in general. As a teenager growing up in New York, when I turned 17, I had the chance to buy a car for myself, and I decided I didn't want a car. I wanted a computer. So I wound up buying a computer instead of a car, which at that age, what was I thinking? But it's what it was. So definitely happy to be here. Definitely happy to collaborate with you, Lisa, and let's get chatting.
So I'm dying to know. So you chose the computer over a car.
Yes.
So inquiring minds want to know, are you one of those teenagers that got in trouble and hacked the internet or businesses that you weren't supposed to?
I did not hack the internet. Okay. The internet was not even a thing back then. Yes, I am showing my age. It wasn't even a thing back then. But I did, and I probably shouldn't admit this on the air, but I did do some nefarious things in school. Writing some programs and writing some code, and I'll just leave it at that.
A long time ago. Changing grades don't matter at this point.
The statute of limitations have probably run out already on that. So.
Exactly.
Okay, but don't get me wrong. I did get myself in lots of trouble outside of school and outside of computers. Just as a teenager growing up in New York City, there's a lot of ways to get in trouble.
I can imagine.
What about you?
I always liked computers, but more from the word processing, typing thing. I could always type really fast. And so kids were intrigued by that. It wasn't anything really that I thought of as a career. It was just something that I did because we always had to type all of our papers and we'd play games on them in library time, showing my age, right? An Oregon Trail in the library on the old Apple computers. But no, I didn't. I didn't get into the hacking side, but it reminds me of war games when you're talking about your story. So, you know,
Oh, yeah, it's funny you bring up war games. So I was teaching a class last night. So I'm an adjunct instructor for UCF, and I just started a social engineering ethical hacking class last night.
fun.
And we were talking about it, and war games came up, the movie, about motivations for hacking back in the day. The motivations for hacking were not monetary. They were not espionage. They were not exfiltrating data. It was just about fun.
Mhm.
Right? Okay, hackers wanted to prove that they can actually do it. And then war games was a great example. So I brought up war games in the class, and yes, they're younger folks in the class, and they're like, "War games? What movie is that?" I was like, "It's a movie from the '80s. Go ahead. It's streaming somewhere. Go check it out. Go watch it. It's a fun movie." But I attribute that, okay, to part of my passion and why I got into this field, because I saw that movie and I was just fascinated at how he was able to hack a company through a phone line and be able to do what he did.
Yeah,
And yeah, so that's kind of where it kicked off one of my passions, or kicked off my passion, I should say.
that's exciting. Always neat to hear people's stories.
So let me ask you this. So as you've progressed through your career, how did you land on privacy?
It was just one of those things. I was in a compliance job, and this was, probably 15 years ago. And on the software development side, I worked with a lot of international companies. So writing code, it was constantly, making sure that code was, worked well in other countries. You have all the ADA rules and everything. And the more that I kept having to look at that, and then got into compliance, it became that there's this privacy thing that nobody was talking about. And I was in an IT security role, compliance role. And then we had GDPR came out, and it's like, who's doing that? Because there was such a huge impact with security when GDPR came out, which is the general data protection regulation that's in the EU. It passed in 2016 and became effective in 2018. And that's really when the privacy stuff really started to become a bigger deal than what it was before. And so as I, just kept asking, like, who's doing this privacy stuff and who's looking at all these international laws? And then 2019, California came a bit to be, and now we have it in the United States. And it became my passion because as I was tackling problems in the privacy space, realizing that they were a lot of the same challenges that we have in security, but nobody was talking about it. Nobody was really researching it. So how do you do privacy and vendor management? How do you do privacy in software development and privacy in, GRC and policies and things like that? So that's really what got me excited about it, is that I found this whole ocean of a domain in privacy that really gave me a lot of room to research and grow and be one of the frontiers in getting some solutions and frameworks and methodologies out there for.
That's awesome. That's amazing. So now the question: how do you feel what the state of privacy is today? All right,
So
there's a lot of talk about privacy, like you mentioned. You really focused on it, especially here in the U.S. What do you think the state of privacy is?
it's I always like to say own your privacy or take back your privacy, because we as Americans feel like we don't have privacy. It's very common. I mean, how many breach notification letters do you get or emails do you get in like a week or a month? More than 5? Maybe close to 10, depending on, what's happened or what big companies have been breached, and then all their third parties, were impacted, to the point that we are just numb to it. And it's really sad. And so the state of privacy, I'm excited that, almost half of our states in the US have passed state privacy laws. However, it's really kind of been at a standstill the last several years. We haven't had any new states pass their privacy laws. Many are trying, many continue to try. I live in Nebraska. It took Nebraska 3 times before our privacy law finally passed. But when you talk about the privacy law being in Nebraska, our law passed January 1st of last year, passed in April of 2024 and became effective January 1st of 2025. However, when I go to companies and businesses, they still don't know the privacy laws. I celebrated my birthday last week. So one of the things I do is I always go to all my doctor's appointments, and I'm that person that will read all those policies and privacy notices. So take note. And for anybody at home, don't just sign your name on those disclosures. I had one where they say, sign here for consent to treat. And when I asked for a printed copy of what I was actually signing, it was a 5-page document, which was way more than consent to treat. And you're agreeing to sharing information and, with researchers and other things that you didn't even know were in there. So the state of privacy isn't disclosed. It isn't fully transparent. It isn't up with the actual laws that are in effect now. A lot of companies are still lagging behind. And one question I get asked a lot, Ray, that I'd love to get your thoughts on is, what if I feel like we should have a federal privacy law, or if the state laws are doing enough?
So that's funny, because I was actually going to ask you the same question as to, you mentioned the state privacy laws. What is the challenge around getting a federal privacy law? So in my opinion, the way I see it is that, and you probably know better than I do, I don't understand what the challenge is. We have federal laws that encompass so many other areas. Why can't we get a federal privacy law? The only thing that I can think of is either federal government doesn't understand what true privacy is. They want to leave it to the states to manage themselves, or they just don't want to take it on. I mean, what do you think is the reason for it?
Well, so it's definitely not that they don't want to take it on, because it's been tried. There's been lots of conversations at the federal level, a lot of private nonprofit entities like ISACA and IAPP and others that are doing a lot of work in that front to try to push for the federal law. But are you aware of state statutes?
I think so, but you might have to explain it.
So state statutes are a set of state laws that are different, and that's how the state governs itself. And there are state statutes. Now, full disclosure, I am not a lawyer, but I do a lot with laws as compliance and privacy and security. So this is not legal opinion for anybody that's listening, but state statutes, there's a set of them. You have a set of them in Florida where you're at, in Nebraska. Every state has their own. Okay. So you've got 50 sets of state statutes. So if I'm in Nebraska and do business in Nebraska and have customers in Nebraska, then I have to follow those laws. If I have customers and do business in Nevada or any of the other states, territories, etc., I have to comply with those state statutes. That's what we have right now with privacy laws, is it's at the state level where each one does their own thing. Largely, there's a lot of consistencies across them. So, for example, one of the things that's consistent is in the US, it's 45 days to respond to a data subject request. Mm-hmm. That's pretty much across the board in all the state privacy laws as of now. It's different in other countries. But if one state were to say, oh, I want it to be 30 days, which is what the EU is, or another state says, I want to be 15 days, which is what the law is in Brazil, they could do that. Then when you start talking about the federal law, now the federal law, the problem that we're running into, or the problem that has been the holdup historically, is that you've got all these different state laws. Some are more stringent than others. Some have different rights than others. And those states don't want to give up those rights. So now if you have a federal law that's taking away some of the rights that you have today, now you're not as protected. And then that's why it's hard to get a federal law that now everybody's okay with, because they're looking at their own state laws and where do they have to negotiate and what are they willing to give up, if anything.
That makes sense. Absolutely. I mean, on the side, because on the security side, we have laws and they're all federal laws. We have HIPAA laws. We have FFIC. We have GLBA. Well, PCI is not a law, but you still have to abide by it. So we have these legal and regulatory requirements from a cybersecurity standpoint, but they're always all overlapping, and they're always they have the same concepts. And I wish sometimes, and I don't know if it's even feasible, just to have one overarching cybersecurity rule. Okay, from the government said this is what you need to do now. With the new version of CMMC, with the DoD, they're working towards but they're working towards that framework. But at the same time, it's only for companies that are doing they're contracting with the government or doing contracts with the government. So I don't know if doing a federal umbrella law would help. You've got the challenges on privacy, you have the challenges on the security side. So I guess only time will tell at this point.
It's interesting that you talk about having, one security law, because this was part of my dissertation research. And actually what my research concluded is that if you look at time, and Information is Beautiful is a great website. It's one of the sites that I used in my research, where you could see the trajectory, the increase of breaches year over year. And when you look back at 2010 and 2011, there are very few bubbles on the site because there were not many data breaches back in the day. As each year passes, and now to today, the size of the bubbles is how big the data breach is when you go out to the website. And now you see so many bubbles, and large bubbles and small bubbles, and they're all overlapping. It almost looks like a plot chart, if you've ever seen a plot chart, which is bubbles, like dots and points all overlapping.
Sure.
And so we have an increase of breaches, but we also have an increase of loss. So now we have all these new privacy laws that have come out since, 2016. We have, if you didn't know, on the security side, there are data breach laws for each state, and each territory has its own data breach law. And those laws then say, do I notify you as a person? Do I do it by mail? Do I do it by email? Do I notify the attorney general? If your information is compromised, in what way do I have to notify you? And that actually is different state by state by state. Right. And so when we start looking at the increase in breaches, and now we've got an increase in laws, to me, that didn't make sense. But when I took a step back in my research and kind of went, well, why is this? And just based on my own experiences in compliance and trying to manage security and privacy compliance when you have all these overlapping laws, one thing that I concluded is that because there are so many laws, state, federal, local, international, especially large global companies, they have to comply with all of these things. How is that possible when the rules are overlapping and conflicting? And my conclusion was there are too many laws, too many nuances, to the point where companies get paralyzed in trying to do everything because the law says you have to do this, right? Laws are not negotiable. You have to do them. It's not like, other standards where it's optional. So then what do? If you can't do it all, then you do nothing. And then my conclusion was it leads to more breaches and fines, because If I'm going to get fined for, doing it and not be compliant, then what, why does it matter?
No, I 100% agree. And going back to your point, yes, the breaches have increased because, again, as I said with the war games example, back in the day, it was all about fun. It was all about proving to yourself and proving to your friends that you were able to compromise or infiltrate a company. Now the problem is that data is the value. Data has been monetized. So more and more hackers are going after the data. They really don't care anymore if your systems are running correctly, if they're going down. They're really going after that data, your data, whether it's PII, PAE, PHI, IP, anything, because they can make money off of it.
Absolutely.
And then also now you have your nation states, which are trying to, so you've got governments hacking governments hacking organizations, because it gives them information that they need. It gives them the data that they need to, bottom line, cyber is the new warfare.
It is.
The next I truly believe that if we ever get into World War III, God forbid, that we are not it's going to be more cyber warfare than anything else.
So let me throw one at you.
Sure.
I came up with a concept called privacy cyber warfare. And because, and I actually have slides. So this was my ISACA GRC talk, I think in 2023. Actually, it was the year you and I met at GRC in Vegas. And so that was my talk. And what it talks about is you've got misinformation and disinformation, right? We know what that is. Accidental sharing of information, intentionally sharing the wrong information. And then when we talk about cyber warfare, now we're talking about the infiltration of systems and technologies, right? And to get at the data. Well, what I have done research and presentations and publications on is this term called privacy cyber warfare, in that that entities, these hackers, these adversaries, even nation states, are using this data as a way to cause harm, deliberately cause harm to an individual. And now you're impacting the rights and freedoms, and in a lot of cases, the safety of individuals. And that's where privacy comes into play.
That's an interesting concept. I have not seen examples. I've seen where malicious actors have gotten data to be able to try to ruin their reputation or directly affect a group or an organization.
I'll give you an example.
Okay.
So think about ransomware, right?
Sure.
So ransomware were, and this actually, we were impacted by this almost when we were in at the GRC conference in 2023 in Vegas. That was right before the MGM breach that happened in 2023 in August and September. What happened is with the ransomware and the MGM breach specifically, it was all going back to your social engineering course. It all happened with social engineering.
Sure.
They had some bits and pieces of information. They would call into the help desk, get other pieces of information, call, other people and use the information that's freely available on LinkedIn and social media and things like that. What then happened was, now with ransomware, they shut everything down, right? Luckily, our time there had just ended, so we were impacted, but that just brought everything to a screeching halt. With MGM, it wasn't as detrimental to the health and safety of people. But what happens with healthcare, I live in an area where one of our major healthcare entities in my town has had ransomware 2, if not 3 times in the last few years. The whole hospital system has had to cancel surgeries. They've had to cancel appointments because they didn't have backups. They didn't know, their systems weren't tested. Their frontline workers didn't know how to do things old school with paper and pen. So they're canceling appointments and emergency surgeries that in a lot of cases, people have been waiting for months to have. And so that's now where we get into that privacy cyber warfare. And that's an example that now I'm impacting the life, the health, the safety and well-being, the privacy of an individual.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I can see that. See, we look at it from a security and a risk perspective. We look at it as these types of attacks, especially ransomware, that are causing damage to operations, like you said,
Right.
at a hospital and so on. It's it's really, number one, to punish the organization. Number two, to get to that data. Number three, and when you're looking at it from a risk perspective, you're looking at it from legal and regulatory perspective because they have to report it. You're looking at it from a reputation risk perspective. How many people are going to trust that organization, even a hospital? How many people are going to trust going back to that hospital if they can't protect themselves?
Right.
Okay. So legal, regulatory, reputational risk, financials, all of those things that are impacts from a ransomware type of attack. Even ransomware. Let's look at ransomware for a second. Even ransomware has evolved, okay, over time. So
Yep.
ransomware started as just being able to encrypt somebody's data and try to get ransom to unlock it, to decrypt it, right? And that's
Yep.
all that's all the malicious actors were doing.
Right.
They went to the next step. They said, okay, I'm going to steal the data first and then encrypt it, try to get the ransom, but I already have the data. So now I'm double dipping. I'm going after a ransom from the organization, and I'm also going to go on the dark web and try to sell their data.
Yep.
Right? Now it's evolved to a whistleblower type scenario. So there was that one ransomware situation where the organization was compromised. The malicious actors asked for the ransom. They were saying, no, we're not going to pay. We're not going to pay the ransom. They were publicly traded. So what did the ransomware gang do to make them suffer? Reported them to the SEC and said, hey, they've been breached. And you know why? Because we're the ones that did it. Okay. So not only did they steal their data, they encrypted their data, and then they ratted them out to the SEC.
And there's another way that ransomware has actually evolved as well, and that it's become a commercial criminal enterprise. That now, if you know how to go out to the deep dark web, Tor, things like that, you can actually hire people to say, write me a ransomware, and you can then, take it and run with it. So now it's a whole, criminal enterprise, and you don't have to do it yourself anymore.
Ransomware as a service. It's out there.
Ransomware
as a service. You can contract exactly. You can do ransomware as a service. You can DDoS as a service. All right. Some of these ransomware as a service organizations actually have they're almost like a corporate entity. They have HR departments. They have payroll departments. They have finance departments. It's absolutely insane.
But I want to go back to one thing that you said with operations. When it comes to ransomware and teams and security, looking at the operations side and how, what's it going to cost from a brand perspective or a breach perspective or fines or things like that. One thing that I've really been pushing for probably the last maybe 7 to 10 years is stop thinking about the operations from that perspective. It's not just about the loss to the company from monetary damages because of fines and breaches and brand. If we as people and leaders and business owners think about the data that we have as that's a person, how would I feel if that was me or my kid or my family? And now that information's getting breached. And now what's the impact to the safety of that person or the trust that that person has in our company or in us, and look at it from a safety and trust and privacy perspective, and not just the monetary side from the operations, now we're moving the needle forward in really doing a better job of securing our organizations and protecting the data and privacy.
So I think that most organizations that do care, okay, do see it that way. So I've run into a lot of organizations that understand the value of the data.
Sure.
They understand that data is an asset. There's a lot of organizations that don't understand that data is an asset. But whether you believe it or not, the biggest challenge is the fact that I understand how important my data is, and I understand I have to protect it. The problem is I have no idea what data I have.
Yes.
All right. You go into organizations. I was a consultant for a while. You go into these organizations and say, "Okay, give me your asset list or your asset your asset inventory," and they'll give me every piece of hardware, every piece of software, routers, everything. Okay, give me your data map. Where's all your data?
Wait, what's a data map?
Yeah, what's that? Well, we have no idea where all of our data is. Okay, do you understand what data you have? Do
No.
you understand what that data is in scope for? Is it in scope for privacy? Is it in scope for the different regulations like PCI and HIPAA and all those things? No, not exactly. We really don't have that information. So I really think that organizations, going to give them the benefit of the doubt, I really think that organizations have good intentions. They just don't know how to tackle it because they didn't do their due diligence at the beginning when they started collecting all this data and storing all this data and tagging it and classifying it and doing these things. And now they've built up so much technical debt over time. They just don't, they're stuck. Okay. Analysis paralysis. They know they have to do analysis and they just can't do it.
You know, I agree with you on that, but this is where it's my opinion and my perspective that the privacy laws is pushing change and driving better security, because the privacy laws require data mapping. They require disclosure of personal information. What information do I have on you? Who am I sharing it with? What processing activities are happening on that information and so forth? There's a lot of different disclosures that are within these privacy laws. In you're spot on in that, 20, 30 years ago, when I started off as a developer, right, back in the early 2000s, we didn't do it that way. You collected the mantra back then, the old school way, and I say old school because you're not supposed to do it this way anymore, was you collected everything because you didn't know what you would need down the road. It was easier to code for it and build for it and collect it now. If I needed it later, then I had it, versus not collect it and then go back and redo code, re-up database schemas, things like that. We both know, right? The cost of change down the life cycle of SDLC versus upfront in design, it's cheaper in design. And so that's what happened. But there was no database, no other data flows other than your database schemas and what was done in code. And now what's changing is the privacy laws say you can't do that anymore. You can only collect the information that's necessary for the specific process and what you're doing, and you can't collect it for any longer than that, and you can't do anything more with it than that. So right. I can't get your information and share it with my friend because it's, I think it's a good idea because she has a business. The laws don't support that. Mm-hmm. And that's where where companies may intend to do the right thing, they're not coming back to some of those concepts to say, we can't think that way anymore.
So to play devil's advocate,
sure.
The reason you're seeing that is because, again, it's a lot easier for them to collect all the data and then figure out what to use. That's
Agreed.
Number one. Number yes. two, they don't know what data they need. So they're going to collect everything and then figure it out. So
see, and I would challenge you on that.
It's easier. Well,
Because how do you build a system if you don't know what it's supposed to do? You can't. So therefore, you have to know the processes. And in order to then support that process, you have to think through that of what data elements do I need? What does that process need to function? So you brought up PCI earlier, right? We've been talking a lot about healthcare. So think about PCI. It's a credit card transaction. If you go to the grocery store or Walmart or department store or wherever, and you swipe your card, when they develop those systems, they have to think about, what data do I need? Do I need the full track data from the mag stripe? Do I just need the card number and the CVV? Do I need the PIN? Do I need the CVV? Like what do I need to process that versus what are the nice to haves that then lower the cost of processing? So if I have just a card number and expiration date, typically those transactions are going to cost a little bit more to process because the risk is a little bit higher than if I have the card number, the expiration date, and say the CVV code, because now that proves, a higher likelihood that I had that physical card. Not to say that isn't breached data and gotten off of the dark web or anywhere else. It's still possible, but it's harder to get at that point. So I have to think through all of that when I'm building that system and application. So now I have to think through what those processes are and those data elements. I don't think that changes any. I just don't think we're doing.
But see, you're assuming that everybody thinks the way you do, and that's the problem. People don't think the way you do. The people don't think the way I do. When you're looking,
there's a very specific role that this is called. Are you aware of what a privacy engineer is?
Yes, absolutely.
Because you are one, and I am one.
Okay, right. So, when you're talking about that and you're talking about the system development, especially the system development lifecycle, it's critical to have somebody like a security person or a privacy engineer part of that. But most organizations don't do that. All right, because they're moving agile, they're doing their scrums, and because it's go to market. We got to get this in quick. And then we'll figure it out. Later. The problem is that they go quick and then they forget about it because everything, according to them, is working fine. So it comes back to doing that due diligence. If you're going to build that system, build it the right way the first time, and that way you're not having to play catch up later on. But again, a lot of organizations don't think that way. All right. I call it, whenever I teach in my the certification classes for ISACA, I always provide the caveat.
Yeah.
Doing it the ISACA way and doing it the real world way.
Absolutely.
So, there is the ISACA way, which is technically the way you should be doing it. And then you have the real world, what's actually happening out there.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So, and it's up to people like us to try to help organizations and educate people on do it the right way the first time, and you won't have these issues.
Okay. So let's go to a privacy requirement. Okay. All of the privacy laws have what we call data subject requests. You can request access to your information. You can request your data be deleted or corrected or rectified, or, there's disclosures of information. That's why we see all these pop-ups on websites and you have to sign privacy notices and things like that. Imagine this. You actually just took a new job, right? You do GRC and stuff. If you got a data subject request for an individual, and you had to track through all of the systems and applications and databases, etc., where that customer's information is. If you don't know where your data is, you can't protect what you don't know. First and foremost, if you don't know what you have, you can't protect it, which makes it vulnerable to the adversary. So that's that's a big red flag right there.
Mm-hmm. That's I'm sorry to interrupt, but that.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. So that goes back to, again, looking at it from a privacy standpoint and looking at it from a security standpoint.
Right.
Right. Data has many uses. There's
It
the
does.
there's the primary use of data for its main purpose, secondary uses of data for integrating with other systems, bringing systems together, and now a tertiary purpose of data has been introduced, which is the data analytics and the data science, looking for trends, looking for using the data to train AI and doing all these other things when it comes to data science and data analytics. So we're always been focused on protecting the data and understanding where the data is from the primary perspective. Where we start losing where the data is once we start getting into the secondary and the tertiary uses. Because what's happening? Going back to the premise of building your systems, what are developers doing? Developers are taking full copies of what's in the primary system and putting it into the secondary system. They don't need all that data.
Right.
They should only be pulling the data that they need. In the tertiary, same thing. They should only be pulling the data that they need. That's where we're losing the battle from a privacy standpoint and from a security standpoint. Because now, once you've moved that data to a secondary or tertiary source, what security controls go in place? It's technically not the primary data source. It's only a copy. So a lot of arguments that we get, well, it's not really production. We're not really using that data for anything outside of data analytics or
Okay.
this purpose.
So
But that's the challenge that we have as security and privacy professionals, teaching them, showing them it doesn't matter where the data is. It's still it's
it
the data.
absolutely does.
It's the data. Okay. An SSN in an EMR is going to be the same SSN is in a data lake. It's going to be the same SSN if you're building an LLM, large language model. It's still the same number. It's still the same data, but people are still focused on, well, this is not a production system. It's in our development environment. Yeah, but you have real data in it.
Yeah. Yes, they do, though they shouldn't.
Right, of course they shouldn't.
The laws say that you shouldn't have, real data in downstream systems. But when you think about the privacy pieces of this, right, and this is another thing that I've argued, and it's part of my dissertation and my research, is why do we put labels on data? Why do we have to treat data as healthcare, and so it's HIPAA, or it's education and now it's FERPA, or it's credit cards and now it's PCI? Like, we have all these different labels. That's how it used to be historically. So then we would sandbox everything off, right? Here's my PCI network. Here's my segment for education and healthcare and all these different network segmentation across an entity. But now what the privacy laws are doing is they're saying it doesn't matter. A social security, to your point, social security number, an SSN is an SSN, whether it's in healthcare, education, credit cards, it doesn't matter. So then going back to what we said earlier, if personal information is personal information and thus should be treated and protected equally because it doesn't care, what qualifier you put on it, then why are we, going back to what was said earlier, you now have all these over regulations because we're looking at it from those specific labels as opposed to protecting it equally as personal information. And then what happens is, because we didn't do that, and historically because of the way that the laws have been, piece puzzled together, that's how we got to where we're at. What happens now is when I get that data subject request, I have not, as organizations, most organizations, at least a lot of the ones that I have worked with, they don't know what data they have. They don't know how it's shared and stored and processed and transmitted and all the things where it's called and then sent, because now I'm going in and updating modules and things like that. And now when I get those data subject requests, if I have 30 days, you have 30 days in the United States to respond. Where am I going to go pull that information from? How am I going to get that back to you and in a readable format that you can understand? Because I can't get you a SQL output of a database. How do I do that in 30 days? Or better yet, how do you do that in 15 days if you do business in Brazil? Do you know where your data is to do that in 15 days?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to throw this at you, because how many people actually know that they have that right under privacy laws? Because I've spoken to people and, oh, I have the right to, they get the privacy statements whenever their data is being used, but nobody reads through them. They just scroll right through it, say accept, and move on. A lot of people don't know that they have the right to do that. And a lot of people don't know the right of data destruction. So
Right.
I was going to bring that up. I mean, one thing is the data subject request. How have you seen organizations handle requests for data destruction? I don't want you to have my data anymore. Get rid of it.
Oh, let me give you a great example. So true story. And this is GRC, right? GRC is policies, and the governance piece, right, is policies, procedures, things like that. When GDPR first came into effect in 2018, I worked for a global organization and my role was compliance. It was security and PCI compliance. And that's where then I started picking up on, or GDPR became a thing, and it was heavily security based. So then that's where I really started getting into the international privacy laws more heavily. And like every company does, they get these new laws, and the law says you have to have a policy for privacy, a privacy policy. You have to have a privacy notice. You have to have a procedure or a policy for data subject requests, right? You have to have all these new policies, but they don't specify procedures and other, the other supporting documentation. So what happened was the company that I worked for, they were a credit card processing. They were the middleman. So they would get the information from the merchants and then reroute it to the banks and credit card companies. They were that middle layer. We did business with a company that was in the EU, and the contract was terminating, and they wanted the data that we had on their customers destroyed. 300,000 records.
Wow.
Okay. 300,000 records. Now imagine GDPR just came out. You have the policies in place. So you checked that box, right? You did the checkbox compliance like everybody else does. And now I have the policies, and so I'm compliant. What we did not do is the company didn't track the procedure. How would we execute this? Where is this data? And what actually are we going to delete? And this is really where I started to get passionate about privacy, because as a former software developer and DBA, I'm now in this compliance role, and I'm working with the DBA team to read database schemas to tell them which fields that needed to be deleted or removed versus retained. They were working with legal, and legal thought it was okay, and others thought it was okay to just delete the entire record. Okay, time out. If you're a DBA and have done anything with Excel spreadsheets or macros or anything like that, you know that as soon as you take one thing away, its relation to other downstream things and other connected things breaks. You can't just delete the record. So Here I am in this compliance role, putting on all my hats and all my experiences, telling these executives and leadership, we can't do that. So now you have to go figure out, what does that procedure look like? And so that's where things then start to break, because everybody has the policy, but have you tested it? Do you have the procedure? Do you know where the data is? Do you know what you're going to do? Do you know who's going to do it? Yeah.
And that's where we in data security or cybersecurity or information security, whatever you want to call us nowadays, because all the terms are used interchangeably. Okay, sometimes that's where we get stuck, because the removal of that data is not a data management issue. It's not a privacy issue from a standpoint of getting it done. That's a technology issue. how are we going to remove those records without breaking systems? And a lot of times, I'm sorry, nothing against you, but a lot of times our data management folks and our data privacy folks, we need this deleted. Okay, well, do you understand the downstream systems? Well, your technology, you should know all about this. It's like,
Right.
no. We are technology and security. We make sure that the systems are up and running and make sure that the systems are secure to ensure that you can manage your data and process your data. It's your responsibility. You are accountable for understanding your data and where your data is. And that's been one of the big fights for a very, very, very long time. Understanding where does data privacy live? And I want to get your opinion on this. Okay, because a lot of people get data privacy and security, and that's why we're doing securing your privates, because they think that data privacy and security are the same thing.
They are
No,
definitely
we
not.
are not. We are not the same thing.
We are friends. We're cousins.
Yes, we are friends. We are colleagues. We are pals. Okay, but we are not the same. Now, in your opinion, where should those processes sit? Should those processes sit within data management, which is also separate from data security, or should it sit in data security? And let's not even call it cyber or info. Let's call it specifically data security. Where should those processes live? Where consumers are going to ask us or going to request information or request how their data is being used or request to destroy their data, where should that go? Should that go to data management? Should that go to security? Where does it go?
I have an answer for you. And coincidentally, I wrote an article for ISACA on this. It's called Passing the Hot Potato. Stop passing the hot potato. It's an ISACA article. I don't remember what year specifically, maybe 22 or 23. And it's exactly this. Where does the role of privacy sit within an organization? And the reason why I call it a hot potato is this. I created this term called ComperSec, which is a collaboration of compliance, privacy, and security. Because in that role that I was telling you about with the data subject request, my role was compliance. So I'm working with IT and security on what the compliance obligations for security and PCI are. Now I find out that there's privacy, security, and IT requirements. So, hey, guess what? You get that too. And then the PCI and security guys didn't want to do their job. So, hey, guess what? You get that too. And, I quickly learned that when you're the one that wants to go research these things or has to or feel the need to, because your customers are your internal teams, that you still have customers, even if you're not external facing, then not everybody likes to do that. And so if you're that person, then you inherit those problems, whether you want them or not. And so that's where I came up with this term ComperSec, because I found myself in this position where now I'm balancing privacy, compliance, and security all at the same time in a role of compliance. And what I found was that when nobody else had the answer, compliance had to have it. There was no somebody else to pass it off to. So when we talk about the role of privacy, it's actually multifaceted in that there's the legal side of privacy. So when I respond to data breaches or my information has been compromised and now you have to get lawyers involved for that. You've got the communication side of it from that breach and disclosure perspective. You've got the security and technology side from where the data is housed and how that data is secure. And then you've got the privacy engineers who are, which is what I do, that sits in this weird spot between all of these roles, helping everyone understand that I'm not a lawyer, so I can't go do the legal things, but I understand what the law says. And hey, technology, this is what we need to be doing to be compliant because the law says X, Y, we have to do these things. And so when it comes to the role of privacy, it really depends on how the organization has broken it down. Some companies have put it entirely in legal as a legal function, and they want lawyers and JDs and Juris Doctorates for that. Mm-hmm. I don't have those degrees. I have, 6 other degrees. Law is not one of them, but they don't know technology. Try to find a technology, a lawyer with a technology background. They exist. I have colleagues that do that, but they are rare. They're like privacy engineers, right? We're shiny unicorns that there's not very many of us that exist. So good luck. Then if you put privacy solely in IT and technology, well, then they don't always know the law side. So now you have to work, then what happens with all the disclosures and things? If you put it in risk, I sat on compliance as part of and reported to the CRO, the chief risk officer, which is another place where privacy can go. Then how is that managed? Are you looking at it from a governance side? Are you looking at it from the technology side, the legal? So it really is that hot potato, as I like to call it and have for years, that nobody wants, that really doesn't have a home. And if you think about it, you've been doing security for decades, as I have. It's like security. Where does security go? Do you report to the CFO, which in some companies they do? Is security its own thing? Is it part of technology? The same thing that we have with security, we're dealing with on the privacy side. Where do you put it?
No, that's been the age-old question when it comes to security. Where does security report to? Where's there the less there's always going to be conflict of interest, but where is the minimal conflict of interest? Understanding if security is an investment in the organization, is it a cost center for the organization? And I can see where you're coming from. Privacy is one of those items that I just don't think that organizations really want to deal with. To be brutally honest, they don't want to deal with it, and that's why they sometimes throw it at security and said, "Okay, you're security and privacy now." Okay, but we are really not equipped to handle the privacy side. And then it gets thrown to data management, and data management, well, no, that should go to the security side, or maybe it should go up through risk. Who knows? Who knows? And that's the thing. You can make an argument for every single structure, depending on the size of the organization, what kind of industry they're in. You can make an argument where privacy lies. But no matter where privacy lies, you still have to have, and even security as well, you still have to have the foundational people, process, technologies in place to be able to manage it effectively. And with privacy, you have that added nuance of the customer. Because privacy is consumer driven. Right. It's all about how we are protecting the customer and what their rights are when it comes to what we're doing with their data.
Now, I sat in on a roundtable just before the holidays on risk and security, and this exact topic came up. And there were CISOs, colleagues, local colleagues that are CISOs were part of the conversation. What their organizations are doing is the privacy role. And I asked them this because I've been curious, kind of how are companies adapting as more and more state laws come out, as more individuals, right? You asked, as we educate individuals on what your rights are. What a lot of companies seem to be doing as far as where privacy goes is putting it in the privacy office, because you have to have a privacy officer or somebody ultimately accountable for privacy, just like we do for security. And so they're putting privacy in with the privacy officer function, and then technology, be it IT or security or whomever, but technology is then sharing or dedicating a resource with the privacy office for the security components of privacy.
And so at that point, does it become security, or is it data security, or is it data protection? Which way does it go? Though I've always thought that the best structure, would be your CISO, because CISO by the name is Chief Information Security Officer. I've always felt that privacy should fall under information security.
Sure.
Kind of. All right. And with that said, if you have a Chief Information Security Officer, then under the Chief Information Security Officer, you should have your privacy area and you should have your security area. So you both have them. You have them both under the same organization, rolling up to the CISO. So if there's any issues, then the CISO would be kind of like the tie. Let's call them the tiebreaker, him or her, the tiebreaker.
What about data governance?
Data governance that's at the same level as the CISO.
That's information.
That's information but that again, data governance for me is even above the CISO level, because governance by design, governance comes down from the board and maybe from the CEO level. So governance is there, and then you have your steering committees, then you have your strategies, then you have your programs. The CISO main responsibility is to drive the program. So the CISO could drive the privacy program and also drive the security program. Now, a lot of organizations might not look at it that way, so they will put a CPO, a chief privacy officer. Now, the chief privacy officer and the CISO should be peers,
right?
And then be able to work together. But again, a lot of organizations don't have the resources, don't have the funding to implement a chief privacy officer. And that's why, and you correct me if I'm wrong, whenever I see some of the privacy laws out there, I see you must have a chief privacy officer or equivalent. Right?
Well, isn't that where the CISO role came from? You were CIOs and CTOs, and now we need a CISO or CISO. So hey, here's another acronym for your title.
Exactly. You know? And we have the same thing on the cyber side. It's CISO or equivalent.
Right.
Okay. Or CISO or assignee, because there's a lot of connotations that come with being a CISO. And nowadays there's a lot of possible liabilities that come with being a CISO.
Oh yeah. And I think that there will be too on the privacy side as more one. I mean, you hit it very well when you asked the question, do individuals know their rights? And the short answer is no. And you know this, and I know this, and it's been one of my missions to educate others and do workshops and presentations for just everyday citizens on this is what your right is. You have the right to go to a company and say, what information do you have on me? They have to respond in the US within 30 days, and they have to give you your information in a readable format that you can read and understand. You have that right, and most don't know that. And I should caveat that with, if you live in one of the 19 states that have privacy laws, because not all of them have them yet. But one thing is, as we educate individuals, as more and more people know their rights, as more people over time choose to exercise those rights, if anything, out of curiosity. I just want to know what information you have. Maybe not to do anything with it, but just to know what's out there. Or say I want to have it deleted. I want to know what I have, because then I can decide if I want it deleted. So the more that choose to exercise their rights, then it's going to bring, more awareness to this. And I really think it's going to drive change with companies, because right now they're flying under the radar, because most don't even know that these state laws are even out there. Mm-hmm. I mean, I was talking to you, mentioning I was at the clinic last week. One of the clinics that I went to, their privacy notice, or their privacy policy that I was given, not only was it several pages long, it was revised in 2013.
Oh, oof.
2013. That's 13 years old. 13 years old. That's ridiculous.
Insane. That's insane.
That is insane. And, and there's the privacy phone numbers on there. And of course, I'm that person that calls the privacy officer. And, because we have to spread awareness. And if there's people like you and people like me that are raising awareness to businesses to say, hey, did you know this? You need to start making these changes and help drive change. Then I think that's what's going to drive a lot of this.
Okay.
Another thing that you said, though, that I want to go back to is the system owners, right? Who really owns the systems where this data is? Because we have this tug and pull in technology, right? The system owner is the business. That's what it's always been. right? But the business doesn't really know where that data resides. They may not even know every single data element. They just know that I need information on a customer, which it should at a minimum include this, 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 and this, right? And so now when we get into these data subject requests, what is the role of the system owner, which is actually the business, because technology owns the systems, the applications, even though it's the system owners, right? The technology is responding to those requests.
So this goes down to, again, organizational structure and nomenclature. Mm-hmm. Because a system owner in the IT world could be an IT person. It could be the business owner. It could be the CTO. It could be the COO. It depends on how it's defined in the organization. The way it should be defined is you should have a business owner and you should have a system owner. The business owner is accountable. The business owner owns all the risk. They know because their IT is supporting their business. Yep. But they own the data. They're the data owner and the business owner. The IT owner, their responsibility is to ensure that that system is up and running. All right. So let's talk about the CIA triad, going back to fundamentals. The security and IT person is responsible for the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of that system to make sure that the data that is stored in there that is owned by the business owner is protected adequately. Mm-hmm. All right. So this whole idea, going back to risk, even I kind of go back and forth with ISACA on this because ISACA says you should only have one risk owner. The days of only having one risk owner are over. Everything is so collaborative. Everything is so dispersed and distributed. And, especially with bigger companies, you have a department, a group of this, a department of that. There has to be accountability on both the business side and the IT side. There has to be accountability on both. Like you said, the business owner doesn't know, the business owner doesn't understand what the systems are. So the business owner is depending on IT. Mm-hmm. IT is depending on business owner to get their direction on what they should be doing and how they should be doing it. But at the same time, IT, from an operations perspective, has to be accountable for making sure that the system is working properly and protected properly, of course, with the help of us in cybersecurity. So I think that as groups evolve, organizations evolve, regulations evolve, technologies evolve, you're going to see a shift on accountability more toward, especially over to the IT side. Especially if IT wants to consider itself not just as a cost center, as a business investment or business continuity investment, they need to take on more accountability for what's happening in the systems.
Which I feel like should have been the case already.
It depends. It really depends on the organization.
That's fair.
All right. I've heard organizations say, well, the business owner says, well, I give 20% of my budget or 15%, whatever it is. I give a percentage of my budget to IT, so I don't have to worry about it. IT has to do it. That's IT's job. I give them money to do it. All right. So they're pretty much throwing it over the wall, throwing any accountability over the wall because I give part of my budget to IT. You can't have that mentality.
So when we talk about risk, yep, right, which is what you're talking about, when you giving your money to another department to own and manage the risk, right? You do GRC, the R for risk. I do it as well. When we look at risk, there's different treatments of risk, right? You can accept, you can mitigate, you can stop doing that, or you can transfer, right? When what you just described is what typically ISACA and others call transfer, I like to use the word share. Some places you'll see the word share.
Share.
because you're not really transferring the risk. Transferring means I transferred that to you. I'm no longer responsible. But that's really not what happens. It's we share it. I'm responsible for parts of it, and so are you,
Mm-hmm.
right? To your point, you have more than one risk owner because we're sharing it. In those cases, then what does that look like? Because when these types of things happen, we're not going to the risk register and writing all these things down. We're just solving problems and doing what technology and privacy and security does on a day-to-day basis, and put band-aids over, more water holes and leaks and, things like that, just to keep patchmealing things together and keep the system working. So how do we manage all of that?
It's a difficult thing because, again, different organizations do different things. So, for example, the larger question is, should IT or security own risk? No, we manage risk. IT and security manages risk for the organization. The business owner owns the risk. Because yes, we might need to take some accountability for something, making sure controls are working correctly. So we have controls assurance, continuous monitoring, all of those things in place. And we need to be held accountable to make sure those things are working correctly. But at the end of the day, if something needs to be done to a system and it's either going to cost money, going to cost resources, time, at that point, the business owner is the one. We have to go to the business owner. Hey, we have this risk. It's going to cost such and such amount of money. We need money from you. IT cannot absorb that risk. And then at that point, what does the business say? Oh, we don't have any funding. So at that point, okay, are you going to accept that risk? They have no choice. They have to accept the risk because they're not going to fix it. Now, where IT, there are certain situations where IT is going to own risk and security is going to own risk. If IT is the owner of the component, for example, infrastructure, risk on a network, routers, switches, or IT has to own that risk. Hardware, IT has to own that risk because they're the ones that own the hardware. They're the ones that own the routers and the switches. They own the servers and the network and all of those things. So from an infrastructure standpoint, IT should own that risk. And I'm probably going to get a lot of kickback from that because no, it's always the business owner. It's always the business owner. We have to think of it in a different way as we've evolved in security, involved in infrastructure, involved in IT and technology.
So
IT has to own a lot of that.
You and I are both in agreement on that, and that the old school ways of how we've done things with over collecting and just doing whatever and data flying all over the place and, risk and ownership of systems, the way we've done it doesn't necessarily work for today's technologies and businesses and rules and regulations. Let's finish on this. Answer this. In your opinion, or based on what you see with your colleagues and other companies that you work with, is there a shift, and how great is it in momentum towards change and improving that and making that better, which we both know is what needs to happen, versus those teams and functions and companies that are still old school way of thinking that really isn't compliant and meet the laws and regulations and give you that safety and trust for the customer?
I wish I can answer that in 1 minute, but because I do have an opinion on this, but we might have to save that for the next episode.
Sure. That's fair.
Because I can tell you exactly where the shift is and why it's not shifting as much as it should be.
Well, that's definitely one thing that we both agree on, is the shift is not happening as much as it should. Right. Ray, it has been a pleasure. This has been a joy, and I look forward to the next episode, and we will pick up with, where does that ownership begin?
Exactly. Thank you. This has been great. I'm looking forward to our future episodes, collaborating with you. That we brought up a lot of topics today that I feel we're going to be able to get deeper and deeper and deeper. We kind of went that 2-inch depth. Now we need to get deeper and deeper on these things. So I'm definitely looking forward to it. It'll definitely be fun.